Greetings and welcome to the short video presentation where we take a walkthrough for a capture the flag exercise entitled Basic Pen Testing. So the first thing we have to do is create that virtual machine for our target, which is Basic Pen Testing 1. Now to do this, we're going to download the OVA file from the VulnHub site. Now when you get up here to the VulnHub site, you have one of three different download options. Personally, I prefer the mirror because that is less problematic than any of the other downloads. So once you start the download process, you're going to have to save the file. Once you complete the download, just remember where you saved it to, because that's where you're going to have to import it from. So now that we have the file downloaded, we're going to open up VirtualBox. And up inside of VirtualBox, we're going to go to File and we're going to select Import Appliance. Now from here, you're going to click on this file icon and you're going to browse on over to where you downloaded and saved that particular OVA file from the VulnHub site. Once you have it, just double click it. Go down to the bottom and just click Next. This will begin the import process. Now this particular OVA file has a problem with the USB adapter. Now this particular OVA file has a problem with the USB controller. So you have to uncheck that box. Make sure you uncheck that box and that will allow the OVA file to start. If you don't, it's not a big deal. You can just go into the settings once you have the VirtualBox imported and then you can uncheck it. Alright, so let's go ahead and move on with the import. So once that OVA file has completed its importation, we're going to find it over in that left window pane down at the bottom. So it's going to be called CSEC. Now go ahead and start it up and you're going to get this error message. And this isn't anything important, so what we're going to do now is we're going to change the network settings. So we're going to click on Change Network Settings. And you'll see that we have a host-only adapter and it wants to use adapter number 2. We're going to pull this down. We're going to tell it to use host-only Ethernet adapter. We can say that that's number 1 or the primary. And let's see what we got down here. The USB emulator is not currently enabled on the USB page. This is needed to support the emulated USB pointing device. It will be enabled automatically if you confirm your changes. All right, we'll leave that as it is. What does this say? Display screen. The virtual machine is configured to use a graphic controller other than the recommended one. Please consider switching unless you have reason to keep the selected graphics controller. So it wants to use the virtual machine SVGA. Let's go ahead and look at our display. Now I am unable to set the correct VGA adapter, but this is not important because we're going to be logging on to this target remotely. So we don't even have to worry about having a decent graphic interface. So we're just going to go ahead and say OK. Let's go ahead and let it boot up. Now another way that we could have fixed that virtual adapter error that we were getting was just to go into the settings. And you'll see that under network, we don't have a second adapter. So with the machine powered off, all we would have had to do was go into the network and add adapter number 2, and that of course would have worked just as well. So you'll see that when we pull down Ethernet adapter number 2, there is no Ethernet adapter number 2 configured. So don't worry about the password. You are not going to be logging on to this virtual machine physically for any reason. It's just a target machine that you're going to try to access remotely as if it was a pen test. So for this particular lab, you're going to want to ensure that your Kali, your attack machine, and your target, the CSEC machine, are both set to have their network adapters configured for host only. So you're going to go inside your Kali just like this, go to Settings, you're going to go to Network. On your adapter 1, you're going to pull this down and you're going to select host only adapter, just like that. You're going to go back on over here to your target. You're going to go to Settings. You're going to go to Network, and you're going to ensure that your network adapter is configured for host-only adapter. Now, why do we do that? We do that so you're not scanning your private network. We do that so that you have a private network with just the two devices on that network, which is the attack machine Kali and your target machine CSEC. We're now ready to proceed on with the rest of the lab. As with any pen testing test that we might perform for a client, or in this case for this particular capture the flag exercise, we want to stay organized. So we're going to begin by creating a folder from which we can conduct all of our business from. And we're going to post this folder to our desktop. So I've right-clicked on my desktop and I have selected the option to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this folder Pentesting. I'm going to go ahead and say create. Now what we're going to do is we're going to change location up inside of our terminal over to this Pentesting folder, from which we will run all of our commands and we will save all of our downloads. For my Kali desktop, I've opened up a terminal and I've typed in cd space desktop/pentesting. Now remember, everything inside of a Linux box is case sensitive, so make sure you add those upper and lowercase letters to. And you'll notice that my prompt changes to let me know that I'm now inside of that Pentesting folder. So the next thing we want to do is figure out what is the network portion of our IP address for this particular location. So if this was a new client and I wanted to know what the network IP was for this particular location, I would gather that information by using an ifconfig command from my terminal. And we'll see that the network portion of this network is 192.168.0. Now it's important that you understand whose IP address you're working with. You're not working with my IP address. You're going to work with the IP address for your network that is assigned to your installation of Kali. Do not get wrapped around the IP addresses that I'm showing you in the video or in the lab. Concern yourself only with the IP addresses associated with your devices. It's always a good thing to keep your terminal clear so that you don't have to struggle looking for the information that you're trying to find. So this next step is part of the footprinting or the enumeration of this network, and we're going to look for what devices are present. To help us discover what devices are currently present on our network, we can use a couple of different devices. Now I like this tool called NetDiscover, and I type that in, give it a space, and I type in -r, which stands for range. Then I follow that up with the range of IP addresses that I want to scan. So I want to scan for the entire subnet of 192.168.0.0, and I type in a /24 to tell it that I want it to concern itself with just that last octet. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and in just a moment it's going to come back and it's going to give me some results. NetDiscover came back and it told me that it found 3 devices sitting on my network. I have a .1, which is obviously is my firewall. Then I have a .29 and I have a .32. I believe that the .32 is my target machine. So we're going to go ahead now and fire up Nmap, and we're going to conduct a scan for what services, ports, and what the operating system is that is running on .32. Now remember, this is my network discovery, not yours, so your IP address of your target will differ. So I've typed in Nmap space, and I want to know what services are running, so I'm going to use the small letter S, capital S, space -AT4, which is going to tell me what the operating system is that is running on .32. So let's go ahead and hit enter. My Nmap scan has completed, and now we can go over the results real quick and see what we got. I show that I have 3 services running on my target. I have an FTP server called Pro FTPD. I also have OpenSSH running, and I also have an Apache server running on Ubuntu. So we know a couple of things here. First off, that this is going to be a Linux target. And if we go down a little bit further, we'll get some OS details. And in here, you can see that I'm running a Linux version 3.2 to somewhere between that and 4.9 Alright, so we got a lot of good information here. So we're going to go ahead and get started with looking at what exploits we can get at with this machine. So it's important that we pay attention to these results back from the Nmap scan, because this is what's going to give us our path and our information that we can use to try to exploit our target. So we see that we have port 21 running an FTP server. Well, what's important here is what version of an FTP server it is running and the versioning of the software. That's what's going to tell us if there is an exploit available. And the same thing with SSH. So we see that OpenSSH version 7.2 P2 is running on Ubuntu. And we also see that we have an Apache server running, and its version is 2.4.18. This is all good information because we're going to use this hopefully to figure out how to exploit this target. I like to rate my exploits or my potential for exploits in order. So I always go after the low-hanging fruit first. In this case, I want to do a NICTO scan of the target. I want to find out more information about what files, folders, and services are actually running on this particular web server. So I'm going to use NICTO, and I've typed in space-host followed by the IP of the host that I want to scan. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. Give it a moment. It'll come back with some good results. Our NICTO scan has completed, and now we can go over the information real quick. We see that there's a lot of good information here. We've got some server leaks on some of the inodes via the e-tags. This is often a vulnerability within itself. But if we scroll down here a little bit, we find that there's a folder, and it's called this secret folder right here. This might be interesting, it tells us. So we're going to remember this. We're going to come back to this in just a moment. And now we're going to move on with looking for any hidden directories or files up on this web server using DIRB. So now that we know that the secret directory up on the web server is of interest to us, we're going to go ahead and use DIRB, which is a web content scanner. And it's going to look for any more hidden or present web objects up there on that server for us. So I've typed in DIRB space the IP address of the web server. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and now it's going to conduct that scan. So after just two quick scans, one using NICTO and the other one using DIRB, we were able to discover that there was a secret directory up on the web server, and we were told that it might be of interest. So we used DIRB to drill down and get some more information. And we found out some good stuff here, such as, number one, this is a WordPress site. And we now have the location for the WordPress admin login page. We can also see the WordPress content, and we can see some other things all related to this being a WordPress site. So using my Kali browser, I'm going to go up here and I'm going to access this web page that's running on this WordPress site. Now, it says it works, and that's great, but I don't believe that's the actual web page we want. So I'm going to do a forward select. I'm going to type in secret, and let's see what happens here. And then we get the secret page, and there's a couple of items on here. One says skip to content, and this is my secret blog, and it says it's just another WordPress site. Let's see what's over here. We have the login page. Well, I happen to know a little bit of something about the default login for a WordPress site. We can go ahead and try to log in and see if we can just use admin and admin. Now, this is out of the box. So when you install or you create a WordPress site for the first time, the default username and password is admin. A lot of people, especially web developers and the such, are too lazy, or they just don't know that they need to change the default username and password for their WordPress site. So what we're looking at here is actually washed out. It's not really the WordPress site. We don't see a theme. We don't see anything. So we know that we're going to have to use a trick, which is add the domain name to the path for this particular web server. Going back over to our NICTO scan, we find that there is a domain name assigned to this particular web server, and it is BTCSec. Alright, so we've got some good information here. So let's go ahead and add to our host file the path over to the secret website using its domain name. Let's see how we do that. I'm going to add an entry to my host file for resolving the IP address of 192.168.0.32 to the domain name of VTCSec. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. Now that command prompt came back letting me know that the command completed successfully. So now we're going to bring back up our browser and we're just going to refresh the secret page. And we see now that we have the theme for the WordPress site. And this is what you should be seeing if you log on to an actual WordPress site. You shouldn't be seeing that washed out white background with the text. And if you see that, then you know that you're not resolving it the correct way using the domain name. So again, let's go after some of that low-hanging fruit, and let's just scroll on down inside of here and see what we have. We have the login page. So I want this login page because I want to just test to see if my hunch is right. So I'm going to go ahead and type in admin, and then I'm going to tab on down and I'm going to type in admin, and I'm going to hit enter. And lo and behold, we get access to the dashboard. As administrator for this WordPress site, we have the complete run of this web server now. Though we were able to guess the login for the WordPress site using admin and admin as the username and password, there is an easier way for us to not have to guess and perform a scan. Now we can use the WP scan utility to enumerate and find out what the username is for the WordPress site, and then we can carry on and do a dictionary attack and find the password. So let's go ahead and see how we do that. I've typed in WP scan space -u, which stands for the URL. I've typed in the URL, and then we give it in a space -- enumerate and a space -u. U stands for users. So I want to enumerate the users using this particular scan. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. In just a moment we'll come back and it'll give us some good. My scan has completed, and it lets me know that the default first WordPress username admin is still used. Now let's go ahead and see if we can figure out the default password. For this scan we're going to again use the WP scanner, and I've typed in the same information as before. On this time I told it that I want to use a word list, and this is where the word list is located. And I want at least 2 threads ran on this particular scan. Now, what I'm going to do here is go ahead and hit enter. In just a moment, it's going to come back and it's going to find me the password that goes along with that admin username. And down here at the bottom, you can see it doing a brute force attack against the username admin. So our WP scan has completed for the brute force attack against the target, and we see that we come back with some information here about the default username of admin and the password being admin. So you see how we used this utility to perform that brute force attack, not only to give us the username, but also to give us the password for that user. This is going to conclude part 1 of this walkthrough for basic pen testing. In part 2, we're going to get more involved with the vulnerability analysis, and then we'll get into the exploitation. I'll see you in part 2.